Marriage isn't just a commitment, it's a trap. While society continues to push the idea of marriage as the ultimate goal, there's a growing number of men who are questioning whether it's really worth it. With rising divorce rates, financial risks, and the evolving role of women in modern relationships, men are starting to ask, why should I get married? But what happened next even shocked his own family. Today we're diving into why men should never get married. Trust me, the truth behind the institution of marriage might surprise you. Let's break it down. Marriage, once regarded as the ultimate milestone in a person's life, is increasingly being questioned, especially by men. Over the years, societal attitudes toward marriage have shifted dramatically, and this change is even more evident among men. Today, more men are choosing to avoid marriage altogether, and this trend continues to grow. The rising number of men opting out of marriage isn't just a passing phase, it's part of a larger cultural shift. Historically, marriage was seen as the foundation of a stable family unit, a societal expectation, and a personal goal. It was tied to ideas of love, security, and legacy. Men were taught from an early age that marriage was essential to becoming a responsible adult. But as time has passed, the once unquestioned institution of marriage has lost some of its allure. The number of men who are unmarried has steadily risen, and many are questioning the very idea of committing to someone for life. Why are more men deciding to stay single? One of the biggest factors is the changing dynamics between men and women. Women today are more independent than ever before. They have careers, their own financial stability, and a greater sense of autonomy. As a result, marriage no longer holds the same power it once did in relationships. The idea of marrying someone for financial or social security has faded, especially since women now can achieve those goals independently. As women embrace their independence, men are starting to feel less of a need to marry in order to complete themselves or feel validated. Additionally, many men today are disillusioned with the expectations placed on them in relationships and marriages. In the past, men were often seen as the breadwinners and the heads of the household, which, in turn, created a sense of responsibility and obligation to marry. However, the modern landscape has introduced a shift in gender roles, with more equal partnerships emerging. This can be a source of confusion for men, as they now face conflicting messages about what marriage means for them. The rise of social media and digital relationships has also altered how men view marriage. With the accessibility of online dating and the ability to meet potential partners without the commitment of marriage, many men are finding fulfilling relationships outside of traditional institutions. These new forms of connection have provided men with greater freedom, allowing them to avoid the societal pressures of marriage while still enjoying companionship. In fact, research shows that more men than ever are delaying or completely avoiding marriage. Some studies suggest that marriage rates among men have significantly dropped in the last few decades. While marriage is still a goal for many, an increasing number of men see it as a risky proposition, especially given the evolving financial and emotional responsibilities tied to it. Could marriage be the biggest risk of a man's life today? For many, it seems so. When it comes to marriage, the risks aren't just emotional, they're legal, and these legal challenges can have lasting, often devastating consequences for men. One of the biggest reasons why men are choosing to avoid marriage is the harsh reality of the legal system, particularly when it comes to divorce. Once the vows are exchanged, the legal contracts that follow can sometimes feel more like a trap than a partnership. Let's start with one of the most significant risks: divorce settlements. When marriages end, the legal process can leave men financially devastated. For many, it's a situation where they lose a substantial portion of their wealth, assets, and savings. A man's hard-earned money may be divided, leaving him with far less than he anticipated. Studies show that men are more likely to face an unfair distribution of assets during a divorce, which often results in a long-term financial burden. In some cases, the former spouse may also be entitled to alimony or spousal support, forcing men to continue financially supporting their ex-wife long after the marriage ends. But it doesn't stop there. Child custody battles are another aspect of marriage that many men find unfair and burdensome. In many legal systems, mothers are more likely to receive full custody of children, even when fathers have been active and supportive parents. Men often find themselves in prolonged and expensive custody battles, where the legal system may favor the mother, leaving them with limited visitation or joint custody. This means not only losing daily access to their children, but also incurring significant legal fees in the process. These financial and emotional burdens can have devastating effects not only on a man's bank account but on his mental health as well. Many men who experience contentious divorces and child custody disputes report a rise in stress, depression, and a sense of helplessness. They may feel trapped in an unending cycle of legal battles, trying to maintain financial stability while navigating the emotionally charged world of divorce. What's even more troubling is how this reality is perpetuated by the societal norms that continue to push marriage as an essential life goal. Men are often told that marriage is about love and stability, but when they face divorce, the aftermath is far from stable. Many men are left with feelings of betrayal, frustration, and resentment toward a system that seems to disadvantage them. The legal consequences of marriage can linger long after the vows are broken. In fact, some studies show that nearly 50% of marriages end in divorce, and a significant percentage of those result in financial ruin for men. A report by the National Center for Family and Marriage Research found that divorced men, especially those who were ordered to pay alimony or child support, often experience a major decline in their standard of living. Could marriage really be a gamble where men lose everything? For many, the answer is clear. The legal pitfalls are not just a possibility, they're a very real risk, one that could cost men their wealth, mental health, and even their relationship with their children. With the system stacked against them in so many ways, marriage becomes a risk too great to take. The landscape of modern relationships has undergone a significant shift in recent years, and at the heart of this transformation is the changing role of women. In past generations, marriage was often seen as a mutual goal for both men and women, with women relying on marriage for financial stability, social acceptance, and security. However, today the tables have turned in many ways. Women are increasingly independent, and this is making the traditional concept of marriage less appealing to men. Women's independence. One of the major reasons men are hesitant about marriage today is the rising independence of women. In today's society, women have achieved more financial and professional autonomy than ever before. With women leading in higher education enrollment, entering more high-paying careers, and breaking through societal glass ceilings, many women are not seeking marriage as a necessity. As a result, the old-fashioned notion that marriage was a means for women to gain stability or security has become outdated. Women now have careers, financial independence, and a sense of self-worth that doesn't require the validation of a man or the security of marriage. This shift has altered how men view marriage, as they no longer see it as something that will complete their partner or elevate their status. It can sometimes feel as if the woman they marry no longer depends on them for emotional, financial, or social support in the same way women once did. For men, this has created a sense of confusion about the role of marriage in their own lives. The changing expectation. This change has led to a shift in expectations. Women today often expect more from marriage than what it has traditionally provided. The traditional roles of the wife as homemaker or caregiver are no longer enough to justify the commitment of marriage in many men's eyes. Women are now looking for equal partnerships, but this can put a strain on men who feel that the expectations are shifting too quickly or that they can no longer meet them. At the same time, some men feel like the modern woman's level of independence leads to an imbalance. For some, the notion of being in a relationship where the roles are not clearly defined can be overwhelming. When a man's identity has long been tied to the provider role, seeing women take on that same role can be disorienting. Men might struggle with feelings of inadequacy or confusion, questioning their place in the relationship. Changing gender dynamics in marriage. This evolving dynamic has also contributed to a rise in skepticism about marriage itself. For men, the allure of marrying someone who is already independent and self-sufficient has diminished. Why marry when the partner doesn't need you for security, and the traditional structure of the relationship has evolved into a more collaborative and sometimes competitive dynamic? Furthermore, many men feel that the modern dating scene has complicated their view of marriage. With dating apps, casual relationships, and a variety of choices at their fingertips, the perceived urgency of marriage has lessened. They can engage in relationships without the long-term commitment and consequences of marriage, which can feel like a safer, more flexible option. What if the woman you marry isn't the woman you end up with? This raises an important question. What if the woman you marry isn't the same person after a few years? While people do change over time, men may fear that marriage locks them into a relationship with someone whose expectations or needs will evolve in ways they cannot predict. The fear of a drastic shift in the relationship dynamic, especially when it's tied to legal and financial consequences, makes marriage a much riskier prospect for many men. As the roles and expectations in relationships evolve, so too does men's perception of marriage. With women becoming more self-sufficient and expectations in marriage shifting, men are increasingly questioning whether the traditional institution is still relevant for them. One of the most significant developments in modern gender dynamics is the rise of the men going their own way, MGTOW movement. This growing movement, which has gained significant attention in recent years, represents a shift in how many men are choosing to approach relationships and marriage. MGTOW is essentially a rejection of the traditional expectations placed on men to marry, settle down, and follow societal norms. For these men, marriage has become something to avoid, not pursue, and they are opting for an independent, self-sufficient lifestyle instead. What is MGTOW? The term men going their own way refers to a community of men who have consciously decided to forgo traditional relationships and marriage. These men believe that modern society, with its laws and expectations, is stacked against them, especially when it comes to marriage and divorce. In their view, the risks of marriage, financially, legally, and emotionally, far outweigh any potential benefits. MGTOW men choose to focus on their own personal growth, goals, and passions, without the burden of a lifelong commitment that could end in divorce, financial ruin, or emotional distress. The MGTOW philosophy advocates for self-reliance and independence, with a strong emphasis on living life on one's own terms. Men who follow this philosophy often prioritize their careers, hobbies, and personal well-being over the traditional goals of marriage and family life. For them, the idea of getting married simply to fulfill societal expectations is no longer appealing. Instead, they opt for freedom, autonomy, and control over their own lives. Why are men choosing MGTOW? The rise of the MGTOW movement can be attributed to several factors, all of which reflect the shifting dynamics of modern relationships. One key factor is the fear of losing everything in a divorce. As discussed earlier, men face significant legal and financial risks when they get married, particularly if the marriage ends in divorce. Men are often required to pay alimony, lose custody of their children, and give up a substantial portion of their assets. Many men who join the MGTOW movement see these risks as too great to take on, especially when the institution of marriage seems increasingly stacked against them. Another contributing factor to the rise of MGTOW is the changing nature of relationships. As women have become more independent and empowered, men are increasingly questioning what role they play in modern relationships. The dynamics of power, responsibility, and mutual dependence have shifted, and many men no longer see marriage as a means of securing love, stability, or partnership. Instead, they see it as a potential source of conflict, where the risks often outweigh the rewards. Additionally, the digital age has allowed for greater freedom and flexibility in relationships. With the rise of online dating, casual encounters, and less traditional relationship structures, men have more options than ever before. They can enjoy companionship without the emotional or legal entanglements of marriage. This shift has made the idea of lifelong commitment feel less urgent or necessary, particularly when many men find fulfillment through more casual relationships. MGTOW's influence on men's lives. For men in the MGTOW community, life without the pressure of marriage is empowering. They are able to pursue their personal goals without being constrained by societal expectations of family life. Men going their own way often find that their independence leads to greater happiness, financial security, and overall well-being. They can focus on their passions, build careers, travel the world, and enjoy relationships on their own terms without the heavy burden that marriage often entails. The growing popularity of MGTOW is a clear reflection of how more men are questioning the traditional role of marriage in their lives. As the risks associated with marriage, legal, financial, and emotional, become more evident, men are choosing to live life on their own terms, rejecting the idea that marriage is a necessary part of adulthood or happiness. The MGTOW movement is growing fast. Why? The rise of MGTOW is not just a passing trend. It is part of a larger cultural shift where men are reclaiming control over their lives and rejecting the pressures of traditional relationships. This movement shows that more men are choosing independence, self-reliance, and freedom over the risks associated with marriage. As the movement grows, it challenges societal norms about relationships and marriage, forcing us to question whether these old traditions are still relevant in today's world. In a world where more and more men are choosing to go their own way, marriage no longer feels like a necessary part of life's journey. For them, living independently and pursuing personal fulfillment is the true path to happiness. While marriage is often seen as a source of emotional fulfillment, stability, and joy, the reality for many men is that it can have significant negative effects on their mental health. Marriage, especially in its modern form, often brings more stress, anxiety, and a loss of identity than the comforting partnership many expect. Despite the romanticized view of marriage presented in movies and media, the emotional toll that marriage can take on men is real, and it's often overlooked. The emotional burden of marriage. When men enter into marriage, they often carry a set of expectations, both societal and personal. For many, these expectations can lead to pressure to be the primary provider, emotional supporter, and decision maker within the relationship. These roles can cause immense stress, as men try to balance the demands of marriage with their own personal needs and aspirations. Over time, this can lead to feelings of frustration, inadequacy, and resentment, as men may feel that their personal desires are sidelined in favor of their spouse's needs or the perceived duties of marriage. The emotional burden of marriage isn't just about the pressure to fulfill roles. It's also about the loss of personal identity. When men become absorbed in the expectations of their partner and the family, they can lose sight of who they are outside of the marriage. Their career, hobbies, friendships, and personal goals can take a back seat to maintaining the stability of the marriage. This often leads to a feeling of being trapped or stuck in a role they did not sign up for, which can significantly impact their mental health, increase stress and anxiety. Marriage often involves navigating the complexities of emotional connection, communication, and conflict resolution. For many men, these aspects of marriage can be difficult to handle. Poor communication, unmet emotional needs, and unresolved conflict can lead to chronic stress and anxiety. Studies have shown that men in unhappy marriages are more likely to suffer from stress health problems, including high blood pressure, insomnia, and depression. While it's common to think of women as the more emotionally impacted gender in a marriage, men often experience significant emotional distress as well. They may feel isolated, unheard, or neglected, which can lead to feelings of depression. In fact, research suggests that men in unsatisfying marriages experience a decline in mental health at a much higher rate than their married female counterparts. The societal expectation for men to suck it up and not express their emotions only exacerbates this issue, leaving many men to silently struggle with their feelings. Marriage and depression. The link between marriage and depression is particularly troubling. A study published by the American Sociological Review found that men in unhappy marriages are at a higher risk of developing depressive symptoms compared to those who are single or in fulfilling relationships. The dissatisfaction in marriage can often trigger feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, leading to a decline in mental well-being. Interestingly, men's mental health is not only affected by the quality of their marriage, but also by the expectations surrounding their role as a husband. If a man feels he is failing in his role, whether financially, emotionally, or in terms of providing for the family, it can lead to a deep sense of failure and inadequacy, contributing to depression. This is particularly true in traditional marriages where men are expected to be the breadwinners or primary protectors. The psychological consequences of divorce. The mental health toll of marriage is even more significant when it comes to divorce. Divorce is often a traumatic experience, and the aftermath can be emotionally overwhelming. The emotional distress of losing a partner, especially after years of building a life together, can be incredibly damaging to a man's mental health. Many men experience feelings of grief, anxiety, and loneliness during and after divorce. For those who face contentious divorces, the emotional and financial stress can be even more severe. Divorce also often leads to feelings of isolation. Men who have gone through a divorce may find themselves without the support system they once had. They may struggle to navigate their social circles, as their friendships often revolve around their ex-partner or family. This isolation can exacerbate feelings of depression and anxiety. Is marriage worth the emotional toll? While marriage can offer emotional fulfillment for some, it's clear that it can be a double-edged sword for many men. The emotional burdens, stress, identity loss, anxiety, and even depression are real and cannot be ignored. When these mental health consequences are considered alongside the legal and financial risks, it becomes apparent that marriage may not be as rewarding as it is often made out to be. For many men, the emotional toll of marriage is simply too high, and the cost outweighs the potential benefits. As society continues to evolve, men are beginning to recognize that they do not need to marry in order to find happiness or fulfillment. The increasing awareness of the negative psychological impacts of marriage is one of the driving forces behind the growing trend of men choosing independence over commitment. So, should men ever get married? The truth might surprise you. While marriage is often presented as the ultimate goal for men, the risks, challenges, and emotional toll that come with it are too great for many. From legal pitfalls and financial ruin to the pressures of maintaining a perfect relationship, marriage today can feel like a gamble that many men are no longer willing to take. As we've seen, men are increasingly choosing to build fulfilling lives without marriage. They are embracing independence, focusing on personal growth, and forming meaningful relationships on their own terms. In a world where the traditional institution of marriage no longer holds the same appeal, men are finding that their happiness doesn't depend on a wedding ring. But ultimately, the decision is up to you. Is marriage worth the risks, the emotional strain, and the loss of personal freedom? Or is it better to carve out your own path, free from the expectations and limitations that marriage often brings? The truth is, there is no one-size-fits-all answer, but as more men choose to go their own way, it's clear that marriage is no longer the only option for a fulfilling life. The question remains, will you take the plunge or remain free?